Good evening and welcome to the last executive of the year. I'm sorry that we had to have this because it was split with on PERDA with the executive, which we had 2-3 weeks ago. The gentleman shaking his head. Well, perhaps you'd like to argue with our monitoring officer. Any apologies? No. Any declarations of interest? There are no public questions tonight, so moving on straight to the members' questions. Malcolm.
Good evening. I'm very pleased to see that the Council treats homelessness and rough sleeping seriously and as a priority, even though it remains at a low level in the borough. Can you tell me, please, that you confirm what action is being taken to manage this issue ongoing?
Thank you for your question, Malcolm. As you can see tonight in the agenda, I'm bringing forward the homeless and rough sleeping strategy, which forms part of overall housing strategy. It's probably one of the most important papers that I'll bring to the council. I can confirm the council does treat homelessness and rough sleeping very seriously. And although the numbers involved are relatively low, as you've said, the council recognises the devastating impact it can have on individuals and families. Those impacts can be wide-ranging and long-term, affecting their health, education and employment, among other things, in other areas of their lives. The draft homelessness and rough sleeping strategy that is being recommended for approval by the executive at this meeting sets out the strategic approach to prevention, management and support of those threatened with homelessness who are unfortunate enough already to be homeless or sleeping rough. It contains 4 strategic priorities. One is early intervention and prevention, working towards ending rough sleeping and tackling hidden homelessness, and building more affordable homes each year, and supporting our vulnerable residents. Within the 4th strategic priority, the strategy highlights current actions and proposals for a number of key groups, including care leavers, young people and those who have experienced domestic abuse, people with mental health problems, those with learning difficulties, ex-offenders and military veterans. The strategy includes an action plan that will be monitored, reviewed and updated annually. The action plan highlights the key outcomes we are aiming to achieve under each strategic priority. In line with the Homelessness Reduction Act, the main focus for the Council and our partners is to prevent homelessness through early intervention and support. The Council has strong partnerships with agencies, charities and organisations across the borough. And there are a number of active and effective forums and working groups both across directorates within the Council and more widely. Through those partnerships, we aim to identify at early stage those who may be at risk of becoming homeless and provide early support and advice. We also continue to work together to set up clear, accessible housing pathways for all identified key groups. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. When did the council last carry out a survey of rough sleepers across the borough?
Okay, I know the answer to this. I mean, we carry out a survey of rough sleepers across the borough on an annual basis, and the last one we carried out was in the middle of November. Through the information we collated through our partners and identified with, as I say, charities, other organisations, we identified that we have 10 sleeping rough in the borough, and this figure compares to 7 in 2018, which, although small numbers, is a significant increase. For information, this compares with Reading, which they obviously have some different problems, but they actually have 25 rough sleepers at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Imogen.
Good evening. Hi. Okay. Within the homeless rough sleeping strategy, which you're obviously going to discuss this evening, I can see that some people have been moved into temporary accommodation. Is there any data on how long people stay in temporary accommodation before being moved into permanent accommodation?
Okay, Imogen, thank you for your question. I can confirm the Council monitors and reviews the use of temporary accommodation and works closely with the individuals' families involved to help them find a secure and permanent address to live in. The Council uses its own stock. For instance, we're currently using between 30 and 40 properties within the proposed Gorse Ride regeneration area, or specialist accommodation to provide temporary accommodation, but also occasionally, and we don't like doing this, we need to use bed and breakfast, but that tends to be on an emergency basis. We are committed to reducing the use of bed and breakfast, particularly with families and children, as it doesn't really fit what they need. Between April and November 2019, we have placed 89 households, mainly single people, in bed and breakfast, with the average stage per household being 25 days. All these households are owed a relief duty as introduced under the Homelessness Reduction Act, which came into force in April 2018. That places a new duty on local authorities to relieve homelessness for up to 56 days for all eligible homeless applicants, regardless of priority need. All households housed in emergency bed and breakfast and in temporary accommodation have a personal housing plan, they call it PHP, to help support them to find sustainable permanent accommodation. Each case is then reviewed and discussed at our weekly review meeting.
Sorry, yes. So what would be the longest time that people are staying in temporary accommodation?
Well, the average is the average, as I've said here, is 25 days. The issue around the accommodation is very much finding suitable accommodation, because if you've got a family, for instance, that have got 3 or 4 children. They've got 3 or 4 children and they're of an age where they can't really share bedrooms if they're different sexes. So it's a lot more difficult with the larger families because we don't have a great number of 4 and 5 bedroom homes. But normally I would be very surprised if the majority of the people that we've got in temporary accommodation are there for more than about 2.5 weeks.
Thank you. Alison.
Good evening. I understand that some part of the Cantley Park enhancement project funding will come from S106 allocation. Can you please advise from which development this portion of S106 will come?
Yes, I can confirm that, Alison. Thank you for that question. I know that I've been asked that question many times, and some people are confusing it with some other developments like Arborfield and Spencer's Wood, etc., etc. But the actual money is coming from the North Wokingham SDL, the land at Kentwood Farmhouse Road. So that's where, but it's closely related to Matthews Green as well, and that's probably what's happened. But it's more specifically the Kentwood Farmhouse Road and the development.
And can you assure me that the funding that will come from the Football Foundation is well in hand?
Yes, I can. There's been several meetings between the officers and the Football Foundation people. Our track record is quite, well, very good, in fact, excellent, in fact, in securing funding from them in the past. And based on that, I'm very, very confident that we'll secure that funding from Foundation. Thank you.
Evening. My question relates to the homeless strategy. I thought it was a good, detailed report and very timely too, but I have a few questions. The first question is, what is the estimated capacity of Woking Borough Council to house homeless single people and homeless families this financial year?
Thank you, Lindsay. You were a bit late to this first question, so I'll reiterate some of the stuff I said earlier on. This document that I'll be presenting tonight is actually part of our housing strategy, and it's probably one of the most important documents that I will present to this council while I'm in this role. As you know, the council does treat homelessness and rough sleeping very seriously and recognises the devastating impact it can have on individuals and families. The homelessness and rough sleeping strategy and action plan being considered tonight by the executive sets out our strategic and practical approach to preventing, managing and support those people who are threatened with homelessness or who have unfortunately become homeless. The key focus of the council and our partners, agencies and organisations remain on early intervention and prevention, providing advice, support to help individuals and families to remain in their current homes, or if that's not possible, to find appropriate to find secure, permanent and appropriate alternative accommodation. We will only use temporary accommodation where we have exhausted all those other alternatives, and we will continue to work with individuals or families using their agreed, I mentioned this earlier on, something we call a PHP, which is a personal housing plan, to find them a permanent solution. The council uses a range of temporary accommodation, from specialist accommodation to some of our own general needs housing stock. In addition, there may be occasions where we will use private rented properties or real emergencies, bed and breakfast accommodation. But we don't like using that because it's not always possible to do it within borough. The council owns a number of properties specifically identified for temporary accommodation. On the Oxford Road, we have 9. Could somebody turn their phone off, please? Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Okay. The council will use a range of temporary accommodation, from specialist accommodation to some of our own general needs housing stock. In addition, there may be occasions when we will use private rented properties or emergency bed and breakfast, but as I said, we don't like doing that. Council owns a number of properties specifically identified for temporary accommodation. On the Oxford Road, we have 9 very nice contained units, including one disabled adapted flat. Foxwood, we have 5 contained units, including, again, 1 disabled flat. Grovelands, we have 12 mobile home units which have been renovated, including skirting them round underneath so they don't just look like mobile homes. Broadway, we have 10 units. However, we've been a bit more inventive. As you probably know, with Gorse Ride, we're beginning to move people out because what we want to do is we want to refresh the stock there. So we've got at the moment between 30 and 40 families actually living in Gorse Ride in temporary accommodation in the regeneration area. The combined budget for supporting homeless families and the housing needs for 2019-2000 was £366,000, and it's important to note that these budgets are subject to grant funding and are reviewed regularly. Where we can, we will build our own accommodation or buy our own accommodation or convert our accommodation for the needs of homelessness rather than put them into bed and breakfast. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you, that's very kind of you. Okay, well, basically, Lindsay's asked what additional facilities would the council need to meet forecast homelessness in the borough over the next 18 months. Well, my answer to that is the action plan attached to the strategy sets out our proposed approach to tackling homelessness and rough sleeping. However, this plan is not a plan that we draw up and put on the shelf. It's constantly monitored and reviewed. For example, in adult social care, we've recently identified a specific need around providing move-on accommodation for adults with mental health problems coming out of hospital and potentially the risk of becoming homeless. However, it is not proposed to build any additional facilities for general needs temporary accommodation provision. As highlighted, the strategy, our main focus is to actually find homes for people that are permanent homes. And in 2018-2019, 248 households presented as homeless to the council. 91 of them were accepted as homeless, but in the first 6 months of 2019-20, 42 households were accepted as homeless. Those households accepted as homeless are placed in Band 1, which means they're ready for immediate allocation. Which ensures they get top priority for any appropriate affordable accommodation that becomes available. And I'm happy to report in the first 6 months of this year, bearing in mind that we actually accepted 42 households that were homeless, in the first 6 months of this year, we actually 212 affordable homes came up for the allocation, and we expect that number to be about the same for the last 6 months. So as you can see, we're gaining on it, which is... Sorry? Yes, well, they would have been, they were accepted as homeless. Again, it depends, I did say earlier on, it does depend on the type of home they need. If they need 4 or 5 bedroom accommodation, that's more complicated for us to find. But I do know that I can't tell you those 42 had actually been placed, but at this point, 6 months out, I would expect them only to be in temporary accommodation for around about 2.5 weeks. I said the average time for somebody being in temporary accommodation is 25 weeks. Sorry, 25 days. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you. That concludes the members' questions. John, comes a paper, homelessness and rough sleeping. Has anybody any questions, or do you want to say anything?
No, only as I just said, Chairman, I mean, this is probably one of the most important pieces of paper we're going to bring to the Executive or the Council, and it will go to the Council because it's such an important document. Basic human rights, having somewhere to live, and my view is quite simple, that it's something we have a duty to supply. It's not always easy with some rough sleepers. We do have some people that we have housed, they're back on the street, we house them, they go back on the street. But this really is to deal with the general issue around homelessness. And I'm quite proud to be part of a council that are delivering 400 affordable homes every single year, because that's bearing in mind that our housing stock, our housing waiting list, or people on the housing register currently, and we have about 400 which are actually what you would call in need. So they actually do need a home. So as you can see, each year, if we can build 400 houses, we can very much stay on top of it and hopefully eat into some of the other categories. If you're a single person with a job, you come somewhat lower down, but I'd like to think, and we are going to be building more 1 and 2 bedroom flats to take care of that need. So if there's anybody got any questions?
Thank you, John. On page 26, it's distressing to read that in the agenda in Q1 of 2019-20 that referrals of victims to Berkshire Women's Aid have increased by 85%. Please can you reassure us tonight that this strategy will not only cover women fleeing from domestic violence, which is on line 2 of domestic abuse, as written there on page 26, but also those fleeing from coercive domestic abuse, which has been recently recognised in law. Also, I think it's relevant that this strategy should cover men too, who also can become victims of domestic abuse, where they are eligible in this particular strategy, where they might qualify.
Obviously, it's I don't like to say it, but it's become more fashionable, and we're beginning to recognise more and more domestic abuse, and I think people are feeling a little bit braver about coming forward. Nobody should live in fear, and they should be in the top priority, and I will make sure while I do this job, they are.
I was pleased to see the item on page 29 about substance misuse. I think that's one of the causes of people bouncing in and out of accommodation quite often, where they're given accommodation and then they actually can't stay in it for various reasons. I just wonder if you've got anything to add about how you're dealing with substance misuse to actually stop people being addicts rather than allowing them to bounce.
Obviously, drug use is somewhat complicated because we don't always know why people take drugs. Sometimes they take drugs because they are homeless. Sometimes they take drugs and become homeless. So, again, I mean, working with agencies such as the police, if we can, it's not the council's job to take people and put them on but if we can help them in any way, I think it's important that any strategy we write is pointing in the direction of help for these people. Okay. The Executive approves the Wokingham Borough Council Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Accommodation and Strategy for 2020 to 2024. I recommend it to you, the Executive. I did mention earlier on that it is going to Council, but as I say, it's such an important document. It will go not just to Executive, it will go to Council, and it will form part of the informed housing strategy in the Council. It's not a document that goes on the shelf. It's a working document, a living document, and as we need to, we will update it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Cantley Park. It's in a terrible state of disrepair, Mr. Chairman, and pitches are in a very poor condition, which leads to a very unsatisfactory experience for our residents. Demand for the pitches are growing. There are currently 534 teams, football teams that is, and the number is growing. And to meet the demand, we'll probably need another 9 3G pitches in the coming future. Currently, the teams are travelling out of the borough to use football pitches elsewhere, and that's adding to our carbon footprint. Current parking issues, it's not enough parking spaces there, so we need to have some more parking spaces there as well. So I therefore seek approval from the Executive for phase 1 of start in the summer of 2020 for upgrading the pavilion, 40 additional parking spaces, new cricket pitch, new cafe, and a new 3G pitch. Phase 2 will start in spring of 21, and that's to upgrade the grass pitches. So I ask for your approval. Any questions? Oh, beg your pardon.
As a representative of Norreys, where this is going to, where Cantley Park is, I'm absolutely thrilled that the investment is going to be made into the ward, so thank you for that. But can I ask the exec member to do all in your power to consider the needs of other sporting interest groups over and above just the football players and the football teams? We have many residents within Norreys who are keen basketball players. I know cricket has been considered as well, but can we just make sure that we're looking at the needs of other sporting interest groups over and above football teams when we're redeveloping the park, please?
I think that's an excellent question, and we do try to cater for everybody, and I will look into that and make sure that other sports are considered.
When will it actually be complete, Barry?
Phase one, I said it'll be summer of next year, providing that there's the planning permission that goes through, and then the Football Foundation comes up with the money. And the phase one will finish before phase two start, which is spring of 21, and by the end of middle of 2021, we'd hope to complete it.
Charles, yeah. Sorry, is that a question or happy?
No, I'll say I'm happy.
Okay, so the recommendation is to agree a consultation, and subject to the consultation outcomes, agree to upgrade the facilities, agree in principle the upgrade of the pavilion, additional parking and additional cafe, agree to the enhancing of football pitches and building the new 3G pitch, cafe, social space, upgrade the sports pavilion, artificial cricket wicket, additional 40 parking spaces, and subject to funding from the football, approve the release of Section 106 monies to the value of 5 to 8k. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, before I start getting on to specifically the strategy, just a little bit of background. I think the situation with adult social care across the country is fairly widely known. To take a couple of statistics, I saw out of a recent report that 89% of adult social care directors have no confidence or partial confidence their department will meet its statutory duties. 68% of departments will be overspent, which are quite horrific figures. It's not a problem we have here, I'm pleased to say, that due to the hard work of the officers and identifying 2 one-off cost savings, we're going to be within budget this year. This is a credit to all the staff, and I want to publicly say thank you to them. Against this kind of difficult national background, there's only really 2 choices for adult social care. It's almost all statutory services. We have to do it. We have no choice. Basically, we can either sit and react to things as they happen, commission services as they come in, but just simply to stand still means a £3 to £4 million increase in spending a year, 3 to 4% on council tax. The other way to do it is to try and plan for the future. This is a demand-led service, to predict where the demand will go, basically, and to plan and actually manage that. And the plan tonight is the first of several strategies that will appear the next few months, identifying how we want to do that. Now, to give you the bald kind of statistics here, we spend currently £19.8 million per annum on caring and looking after people with learning disability. It's 40% of the adult social care budget. So it's a vast amount of money. And this is spent on caring and supporting 520 residents. In this borough, we've got a high prevalence of learning disability, and we have a high spend, therefore, to support these people and their families and carers. We do some things here really well already, basically. We are proud to be ranked second in the country out of 150 local authorities in the number of people with learning disabilities we help get into employment. So, I'm not going to read through everything that's on the sheet here, but to give you the kind of headlines off the top of it, the document here generally is a vision and plan for how we will look after this important group of people for the next 5 years. We'll continue to make year-on-year increases in spend on this group as people live longer and make the transition into adulthood. This is not a top-down thing that has been dreamed up in here. This is the result of months and months of work, consultation with 150 people, basically, in our care at the moment, and also the charities and various bodies that support them. And the main points, basically, we plan to do are on page 101 in the report and the timeline for when they will appear. But the basic thrust of it is a specialist learning disability service to support this group of people, in particular younger adults also, increasing the range and variety of services and support also available, providing more housing options, working with the new local plan to make sure that this is fed into that, supporting carers and their families better, working with the NHS to improve the overall health of people with learning disability, and making sure that the voice of this community is heard and represented going forwards. So that's the plan. It's the first of several that are going to appear the next few months, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to see on page 67 that so many people were involved in designing the strategy from organisations like CLASS, from NCAP. Later on in April 2020, will you said that you'd be asking them again. Will you be going back to those groups again to involve them in feedback?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is not a rigid framework. This is a working document, a working plan. It's going to be amended and altered as it goes forward, and their feedback's really important. We don't believe in doing things top down here. For it to work, it has to be responsive and involve these people. And also, inevitably with something, we hope everything with this will go perfectly, but some bits of inevitably will need tweaking and altering and amending as it goes along. So very much so.
Charles, I notice same sort of question. My concern is, speaking to some charities, they're telling me that there are certain councils that they deal with who are actually using them as a way of saving money. Can we be confident that we don't do that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the bottom line is the ultimate responsibility for this lies with us. I mean, we're keen to work with voluntary groups across the borough, and there's a consultation going on with them at the moment on a wider level, which will see the light of day shortly, which is about working with them on what services they can offer, how they can be integrated with what we want, and trying to work with them rather than giving them a block grant, just a pot of money, and saying, go away, do what you want with it, saying, we would like you to do this, 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 and this, basically, and what can you do for it, and then monitoring their performance going forward. So very much so. We have the responsibility to the residents, but we should use the voluntary sector wherever possible to work with us, because they can do many things that we can't.
Is the Executive approve the Borough Strategy for People with a Learning Disability as set out in Appendix 1 of this report. Those in favour? Thank you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the Executive meeting, and a very happy Christmas and a very Merry New Year. Thank you.